Start. We are here to kick off with a case study of this Immaculate Body and Emma van Straaten, who many of you will know, was our first winner of Discoveries in 2021, the inaugural programme. And we thought it would be really useful to focus on an example of how to publish a debut through one of our own, and her amazing team here, or some of her team, of course, because it takes a huge team to publish a book. So I have, closest to me, Emma van Straaten. Next, I have Lucy Morris, who is her literary agent at Curtis Brown. Lucy also was fundamental in setting up Discoveries with her colleague Anna Davis, who will be with us later, and they are Curtis Brown and Curtis Brown Creative are founding partners, and a huge part of the success of Discoveries. And many of you, or all of you, will have had conversations with agents and been through the writing course from Curtis Brown Creative. Next, we have Rhiannon Smith, who very kindly has joined us from mat leave. She is editorial director at Little Brown, and she is the lovely Emma's editor. And then on the end, we have Katya Ellis, who is the senior publicity manager. So, to start, there are obviously many ways to publish a book, and many of you will have deals, be in that process already, or have understood from what you've read and been to events, what you've heard at events, how to do it. Hachette is obviously one of the big five. This is a sort of best practice example, but we want to go right back to the start first. And I want you, Emma, to kind of kick off and talk a little bit about, I suppose 5 years ago, really, autumn 2020, when we were all in lockdown.
In my pyjamas.
In your pyjamas, yeah. And writing, and then the call for submissions for Discoveries and kind of what that looked like for you. Where did you see it?
I saw it on Instagram, and I remember that I was on the sofa in my pyjamas because very bitter, because my boss had been furloughed and I was doing her job. So I retaliated by not working as much as I should have, and was on Instagram a lot. And I remember it just popped up. I'd followed the Women's Prize kind of on socials and kind of in practice for years. And I just thought, what a perfect opportunity. I was kind of looking for the catch. Kind of the more I looked into it, like, is there a fee or something, or is it something that I can't possibly do? But I just saw it, and I could. And again, because it was COVID and everyone had so much more time on their hands, or many people did, I had been kind of playing with something that I'd written before and wondered if I could make it into a novel. And so I just, I think it was September or something, it was kind of a few months in advance, yeah. So I thought, I do have the time, I've got months to kind of hone the writing that I've got and see what I can come up with. And so I was still very much in my pyjamas, but I had this goal of January, and I think loads of people here submitted it in the final few days before the deadline ended.
Yes, we love that, don't we?
Sorry.
We're always encouraging people, please enter it early. But of course, over half the applications come in that last weekend, I think. But that's good. We want you to keep on working on it. Okay, and Lucy, I want to talk about your role in kind of the beginnings and that first year. I mean, it was a weird time. I really remember having lots of Zooms with you and Anna, and that first judging process, I really remember you talking quite early on about Emma's work, which was not called This Immaculate Body then, and being really excited by it. But it's obviously a really different way for you to have work sort of come to you, as well. So what was that like? Did it make any difference to sort of how you approached it when you were reading for Discoveries as a judge, and then with your literary agent hat on, thinking, I really want this, I'm excited by it?
I think the main difference is that in the kind of normal course of agenting, if I read 10,000 words of something and love it, then I would then ask for the rest of the manuscript and have a lot more, data in a way, for that basis of decision making. But it is such a subjective part of the process, and I think that's what also makes it so difficult for all parties, is that sometimes work just speaks to you in that intangible way. And with Emma's writing, for anyone who's read This Immaculate Body, the voice just hits you between the eyes from line one. And, you know, I really didn't need any more.
And then tell us, talk us through your exchange. Did you email Emma? Did you meet? How did that work in terms of actually thinking, like offering her representation? And how much did she play hard to get?
Can I just say I did not play hard to get at all, at all.
I also did sort of get you at quite a vulnerable time because did you just have a newborn baby?
Yeah, actually was a week old.
Yeah. So I think I may have just called you out of the blue, or did I email you and say, could we have a call? I can't remember.
Yeah, you emailed me and said that you'd be interested to have I think I learned it off by heart. I was just like rereading it and being like, is this real? And then, yeah, we had a Zoom and I was holding Coco, my baby, and you were like, oh, there she is, on. It was lovely.
And then I think we just had a sort of general conversation about what an agent-author relationship looked like, how much I loved what you'd written. I think I asked you how much more there was that I could read. And then, the next thing was you sent me the other, 30,000 words that you had. And
obviously that's one of the pros to Discovery is we really try and keep that barrier low in terms of, the first 10,000 words, roughly 3 chapters is all you need. And then that idea that there'll be time and space and support for you to finish it. But of course, some of you have been writing for years and come to the programme with either a fully fleshed manuscript or more than 10,000 words. So it's about trying to sort of support you in where you're at on that process. What happened next? And then what was, think about, for me, what's the link then into Rhiannon? So how long did you guys work together to finish the book and how many drafts? It's not sort of, a linear, quick thing.
Well, the newborn baby was the problem. So I think I basically took a year out, basically.
We'll
I didn't
call
do
it
any
maternity leave.
Yeah, maternity leave. You were very
also
patient.
Also counts for others.
There was no pressure, but I basically didn't do anything for ages. And then once we kind of got going, you kind of said, great manuscript, but more please, essentially. And so I just tried to write more. And I think your kind of strength is that you're an involved agent in an amazing way. And you've got such a grasp of what the book shape is in a way that I find as an author really difficult to see. And so we kind of went back and forth several times. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sort of starting from basically the big to the small, we did the structural work first, where I think I probably did say quite unhelpfully in that first go, where you had a full arc, but at 40,000 words, where I think I probably did say more, please, because 40,000 words is, a novella, not a novel. And yeah, then we would go back and forth and you would send me new drafts and I would read them and send you notes. And then quite often we would meet up and have a coffee and a cinnamon bun and talk about what was going to happen next. And I think, because we were working with a sort of short version of a novel, the most important thing was for us to really understand what the shared ambition was and who was this character and what was her sort of emotional journey and what made her tick, because I think that unlocked the extra pieces of plotting that you then add in to the manuscript to make it a sort of much more fully fleshed novel. So we had a lot of conversations about the meat of it, I think, and that was the sort of the slight difference to editing that way rather than the sort of traditional way. Yeah, and then I can't remember how many drafts we did, 3 or 4.
I want to say more, to be honest. It felt like more, maybe 5. Let's say 5.
And then, at that point, we then had a really banging manuscript. And it was time to think about sending it out.
And we were kind of trying to fit it around book fairs and kind of sending out at the right time as well, which is, you realise, is a really important part of it.
Yeah, can you explain a bit more about that, Lucy, and how that works?
It's something you can vaguely plan for, when you think the manuscript might be ready. Say, I think it'll be ready in 6 months, and that will be August. Everyone will be on holiday, so we wouldn't even think about submitting it before September, for example. But it's not always as easy to predict as that, because you might have an editorial conversation which unlocks a problem or a plot hole, and it takes longer to figure it out. So part of my job is just talking to everybody all the time and figuring out what do editors like Rhiannon want, what are other agents submitting, is there half term coming up and lots of editors will be away. So it's a sort of unfolds in real time, sort of over here while the editorial work is happening over here. But I will be, in the months approaching a ready manuscript, be doing very difficult things like having delicious lunches with lovely editors and casually dropping things into conversation, which I think is actually what happened with this Immaculate Body.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned it at a delicious lunch we were having, which isn't a huge part of the job, but it's great when they happen. Yeah. And actually quite a lot of business happens on them. And I think I had timed my holiday really badly, and you sent it to me while I was on holiday. Yep. And I remember this, sorry, we're moving on a bit, but I remember this really clearly. You sent it on, I think it was like a Wednesday, and I was checking my emails on my phone, because this is how we all live, on the Monday, and you'd sent a follow-up on the Friday saying, everyone's really loving it. And I was like, okay. And I'm reading it on my phone, which is actually always my barometer. And I was on the bus, and I was like, well, I know what I'm doing this morning. Because I remember just coming in and being like, guys, it's hot. We got to read this. I hadn't even finished it, I don't think. And I was kind of immediately like, we need to get on this, because you had interest and I didn't want it to get away from me, basically.
So how does that traditionally work then, Lucy? Can you talk about, because I see in the bookseller auctions, and then obviously you might have specific editors or imprints that you think would do a really good job on the book, or that it would suit. And then, as you say, sort of putting out feelers early on. Can you talk us through the roots of how it works?
Yeah, so it's a business of relationships. So knowing which editors like what sorts of books is sort of layer one. And then there is, properly understanding somebody's taste and knowing about, their personal interests. You might know that an editor at Simon & Schuster is really into 70s music. Just because you've been to the pub and it's come up. And actually that is a very useful piece of information to have as an agent, because when you have that novel, then you know who to send it to. But, usually what I would do is trail a book in conversation with someone I think sounds about right. It's also a great way for me to practice my pitch in the early stages. And then I will pull together a submission list of editors across, publishing houses big and small who I think would like it, and crucially who I think would do a really great job publishing it. And then all at the same time, I send a manuscript and a written pitch out to all of those editors who should have heard about it either from me on the phone, from me in the months beforehand. They may have heard about it on the grapevine. And then, a bit like submitting to an agent, it's that agonizing weight of, oh God, I hope somebody loves it. But then we're in that bit together.
Emma's in agony too.
Emma's in agony too, yeah. Both refreshing our emails all the time. And what happened with this book is that we had a few different editors start to make nice noises. I'm really enjoying this. I can't stop reading it. Does Emma have ideas for a second book? All of these sort of pieces of information. And we ended up in this case with a 4-way auction, which means that 4 different publishers wanted to publish Emma's book, which meant that I ran an auction, which is much like any other auction in that you have rounds of bidding and a meeting for Emma with each of the editors, where you understand a lot about what kind of relationship you might have with that editor. Do they have the same vision for your book that you do? And I think we had one which saw your book much more as horror. Brilliant publisher, ultimately just wasn't the right fit. Another way that it can go, so I know you asked about different examples, is sometimes there's something called a preempt, which is when one publisher will very quickly put a sum of money on the table to try and snatch up the novel before anyone else does. And there are pros and cons to different sorts of deals, but a preempt usually has a ticking clock, which I think as a debut author can be a bit stressful to make a decision very quickly without a lot of information. But a good agent should hold your hand through that, potentially convert that preempt into an auction. And then you might also see something in the bookseller called an exclusive submission, which is where just one publisher has the book for, I mean, I now can't think of any reasons why we don't favour them, I would say, because it's harder to get, the excitement going on the agenting side, but there might be a previous relationship.
Or it might be someone, like an editor's been working with the author beforehand for various reasons, or has approached the agent about that author.
Yeah.
So there's usually something pre-existing there.
Yeah.
But I agree, it's actually not, it's very much not the norm,
Yeah.
I think. And I understand why, like, for agents, they want to see different viewpoints on the book.
Yes, exactly. So I think those are the sort of the main modes. But as a rule of thumb, an agent will send a book to a variety of publishers, and then we sort of have to wait and see what happens. And every deal is so bespoke in terms of how it plays out. And then Rhiannon and I negotiated a deal, and Emma signed a contract. And then my Cupid days were complete.
Heavenly matches all over the place.
And then my role going forward is to basically be in Emma's corner throughout the preparing for publication and the publication process. So, collaborating with the publisher. If there's a problem, then, you can talk to me and I will talk to Rhiannon and Katya. I should hesitate to say, we're all a wonderful team, and I don't think I've actually had to make any of those phone calls.
Not to me, but...
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Rhiannon, so when you went into the office that day and you said, gather round, boys and girls, who are you speaking to? What types of colleagues are you drawing into the process when you want to pitch for something?
So this one I moved quite quickly on. Usually I'd want to mostly finish a book before I start pitching it, because you never know where it's going to go. And I like to ruminate on things a bit and think really carefully about, there's so many factors that we're thinking about where the book fits on our list, on the list at Little Brown, on the list like in the wider market. For me, it's always been that immediate sense of I can see this on a shelf, and if I can see it on a shelf, then I know where we're getting to. Not like a cover, I mean just... So then at that point I go to my close editorial team, and I'll say, I'd love you guys to read this, but actually more quickly I tend to go to my publicity team and the marketing team, and generally not just the team, but to the people I know who are going to be my buddy on it, basically. Yeah. And with this one, it was entirely Katya from the beginning. I was like, I think I even came over to you and said, you're going to love this. It's so creepy. Yeah. And it's about knowing what you're working on and what your taste is as a publicist, and what you're able to do. And same with marketing and with the sales team, and being able to give them that quick one-line pitch as to, again, all of those kind of thoughts I've been making about why we should publish this, why the market needs this book. Because, a lot of what we're doing is thinking about the market and where it goes from there. And the reader, that's the other thing. It's like, who is my reader? Who is going to pick this book up and be like, immediately, this is for me? Yeah. Because there's many books and many eyes, and you want to grab as many as possible. So I think because it was a Monday, we have kind of 2 key meetings, if this is helpful to talk about.
Really?
So 2 key meetings for us, which is our editorial meeting, where we sit down as editors, and we have quite a broad meeting, because in literary there's fewer editors around, so you want a plethora of opinions, really. So we sit down, everyone's read a bit of the book, or they've read your pitch, and you have a kind of smaller chat about it, and Publicity and marketing are there as well. And then we have what's called our acquisitions meeting, which is kind of a broad cross-section of the company where we talk about the book and talk about what offer I am then able to go back to Lucy and make. And if we're preempting, it tends to not go anywhere near those meetings, and we're just kind of emailing our MD and saying, give me some money. And mostly, somewhat that. And I quite like taking things through the meetings. I like to hear what everyone's thinking, but there's also times when you just want to move really fast and you want to not let anyone get a look in or able to finish the manuscript because you've managed to read it overnight, which does happen, and is great when it does. But I like sitting down and hearing everyone's thoughts on the book as well, because it is such a team effort to publish a book, and my thing is always to build a team as early as possible around the book. That's something I saw as a junior editor. The best books work when you have a really involved team and everyone's working towards the same goal from the start.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit then, both Katya and Rhiannon, about building that relationship with Emma then? Like, it is this sort of transfer from Lucy and sort of working really closely on a manuscript. And then it's sort of, there's a slight transfer there where you become really important. And you might have more editorial changes that you want to make or sort of your own process to go through. How do you build that relationship with Emma or any other debut author, and then sort of potentially go through another round of editorial with them? How does that work, and how did that feel, Emma?
Yeah, we went through a lot of quite strong edits as well. I'd say it's really unusual that I don't take a book and go, I have views, in a good way though. And I think you can tell people that have had agents that have worked with them to do those edits, but also prepare them for the fact that most editors have views. And I think I always try and touch on that at acquisition, because you don't want to be like, by the way, kill all your darlings and start again, because you don't want that to happen once the book's acquired. So I always try and give an indication of where I think it's shared vision as well. There's times I've pitched for books where the author has had and that happens with the horror thing, completely different view to me on what their writing means and where it should be going. And that's not the right thing. I'm not trying to push an author to do something to their book they don't want to do. That's never going to work. So we did kill a lot of darlings and we refined the book and worked through that. And I always say that bit after acquisition is about me building the trust with Emma or any author to do that, to work on that. And it's quite a quiet point at which you're still kind of going backwards on the manuscript, and I'm kind of having all these conversations in-house that are moving forward. And then when we've got a manuscript that I'm like, yeah, we're there, then we introduce the team and we kind of move forward a bit more with what then becomes the campaign.
So I'll draw in Katya on that note. And we do have time for questions. I have a long list of questions here, but you are welcome to ask questions in a couple of minutes, so get them ready. So Katya, you were involved at a really early stage, which I think is really beneficial. Did you always have a really clear idea for where you could position that book, what you might do with it, how you might play with it in terms of media and events?
Yeah, so I think everything that we've been talking about in terms of kind of behind the scenes work and being introduced to the team and a shared vision. I think in terms of Publicity and what I do, just for the room, Publicity is basically free media, so free content. So that will be newspaper reviews, interviews, broadcast, features, online pieces, as well as events and that sort of thing. Whereas marketing is more paid advertising and bookshop outreach, and that, just in case you don't know the difference. So as a publicist, my job is to basically just get Emma's book out to as many people as possible in the media, get her doing events, get her doing interviews. And I think what Rhiannon was saying about a team having a shared vision and having that vision align with what the author seeks. I think the funny thing is as a publicist, you can be, in the best case scenario, yeah, you have the very early, you kind of invested in the book from an early point. So I think Rhiannon sent the book around October 23, and then we obviously published February 2025. So I was reading at that point. When we pitched for the book, I sent points for the publicity campaign. So often that will be, it depends on each situation, but often if an agent is saying I'm expecting campaign plans for each offer, then I'll be asked to put together some points. So that's also kind of making sure our vision aligns. So I know for that, it was sort of like saying to Emma, this is where I see your book kind of getting reviewed. Here are some comparison titles and reviewers that I'd be targeting. So again, that kind of like, I see your book sitting in this space, and making sure like she felt the same about that. And then that is, if we are successful in winning the book, like as we did with Emma, that's the basis that I form for my plan. So again, like Emma had all of the kind of like big publicity vision from offer stage, and then it was sort of like, okay, I'm going to execute it this way. And I think, like, a side note, I think is really funny that you might like meet someone on your team. I think I met Emma 7 months before, but I'd been speaking to Rhiannon about the book for like 18 months. And obviously, like, it's too many cooks. Emma doesn't need to meet me like 18 months before publication, but we'd been talking like the title change. Rhiannon was like workshopping titles with me. I remember after women's hour, Emma and I like went for a coffee, and I was like, yeah, when this title, and she was like, you were in those conversations, and I was like, yeah, I was just lurking from my point. But like all of that stuff, you're like very invested from an early stage, and we had like such a creative collaboration for that. And with Emma, even though we didn't know each other, I was just lurking in the background. But yeah, I think most of the time you do have that like clear position in terms of where a book will sit and where you want it reviewed, what features you want picked up. Obviously that changes when you meet the author. Emma and I spoke, like we worked really closely together in terms of like, do you have any pieces you'd like to write about? Do you have any things that you feel comfortable speaking about? But you kind of know, like, in terms of events, like where it will sit well and what shops or festivals do well with certain books. So that's like my job to bring that expertise in. But then as always, like with the media landscape, there's different trends and you have to be reactive. So something really interesting in Emma's campaign was like femgore emerged as this trend. And Emma's book got picked up in loads of femgore roundups, and we were both like, what's femgore? But like it's something that you just kind of, again, that didn't exist when I was like pitching the book out, but it suddenly just tied in like perfectly with publication. So it was about like pivoting and jumping on that hook. So like for Women's Hour, when I was pitching them, I kind of was like, have you seen this femgore trend? And then suddenly they were like, yeah, like let's get Emma to talk about femgore. And then we both kind of had to like do the work to be like, what is the book? Like, what is femgore? How does it fit? But it's all like, you know, it's being like, this is now a new trend, and actually your book fits perfectly in this trend, and we couldn't have anticipated it. And, you know, that's now something, like Emma just did an event at Waterstones Nottingham this weekend that was like women in horror, and she was on a femgore panel. It's like, femgore is the new, like, whatever. And that's something I know we might talk about paperback, but like, that's something that we're thinking about with the paperback package. I know you guys have had conversations around that too, but yeah, it's just about working closely together and making sure we're aligned on vision and always talking, really.
Before we jump into paperback, I want to go to pick up something on rights. So what we've been talking about are UK rights. So I assume print, and audio. Lucy, can you talk to us about international rights, and when people take world rights and you do that all in one go, or then you sell individual sort of territories, and what you did for Emma's book?
Yes, definitely. So there are different ways to cut the cake. You can sell world rights to a publisher, which means that the publisher then handles the translation rights and the North American rights. Very occasionally, a publisher may also take film and TV rights. And then depending on different types of agencies, we're a very large agency, so we can handle everything in-house. We have a translation team, we have an American partner, we have a media rights, so film and TV, we have a department for that. Some other agencies will set up specific books with film and TV partners at different agencies, for example. So with Emma's book, I had shared the sort of nearly final but not final manuscript with a colleague of mine at UTA in New York, who loved it and who sent out the book in America, sort of dovetailing with the UK submission. So the American deal happened in November, and we did the UK deal in October. And then my translation colleagues submitted the book to the publishers that they work with. So that's publishers publishing into French, German, Chinese. And then we also did a media rights submission I actually can't remember exactly when that happened. I think it would have been after the main publishing deals happened, because we then had a lot to capitalise on. And yeah, I mean, watch this space.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. I want to come back to you, Emma, and I want to ask you, I know you only published in February, but it feels like you've done so much since then, largely down to Katya, probably, so much promotion. She's worked you hard. But getting out, being on panels, meeting readers and selling books, ultimately. Was there anything that didn't play out as you expected? I think we can all have this idea of what it's like to publish a debut book. But was there something that surprised you, or you think for your paperback, I'm going to do something differently? Or was it all just dreaming?
It was all dreamy, but kind of everything was a surprise. I feel like writing is, everyone always says writing is solitary, but with Discoveries, you do actually build a community, and I don't actually feel like it is anymore. But back in, then, it felt like I'd written it alone, and it's just, the surprise is that people read it and bought it and then had thoughts about it. I was saying at the Nottingham event, I stumbled upon a Reddit thread about the ending of my book. I was literally Googling my own book to find a picture of it to use on social media. And I was just someone just commented, guys, what happened? Did this happen or did this happen? I can't quite work it out. And then there were just 5 people below saying, I think this happened. And I was just all of your answers are amazing. And the fact that someone has had a thought about a thing I wrote in my pajamas, as you know, is just absolutely mind-boggling. And so everything has been a delight. And the most stressed I was before Women's Hour, just because it was live and it felt different. And I didn't know that was a thing that I could ever be on, especially because I'd literally listened to Women's Hour for years, and I was this is wild. But yeah, it's just the fact that everyone promised me people would read it and it would be in shops, but I didn't believe them until it actually happened. So that's kind of the main surprise, is that it all kind of worked out and was amazing.
Yeah. And I know that you're going on to book 2, but also Rhiannon and Katya will have you busy with paperback. Can you talk a little bit about what paperback means? What does it involve, and what role will Emma have in the paperback edition of This Immaculate Body?
So I'm going to plead mat leave here in that I haven't actually seen the paperback plans as yet. But paperback tends to be, we tend to put a lot into our hardback publication to gather the reviews we want from Publicity, to kind of get that groundswell of support, to get it on the radar with booksellers. And paperback tends to be much more of a kind of, we put an edition we put out into the market, we look to kind of capitalise on what we've done for the hardback. So what you really want is that groundswell of support to carry you through your paperback, but it's kind of fewer events come through. You don't have the same review slot coverage. So it's much more about kind of the longevity of the book and making, in a real fiscal sense, it's a cheaper edition as well, so it means that it's more widely available to a mass market. It's also an opportunity to kind of rejacket if we think that that's something that works for the book for various. There's so many reasons why you might rejacket a book or tweak the jacket. Again, bringing it to fresh eyes. But there's also sometimes you'll see the book just rinse and repeat from your hardback, and that's a visual language that works through. And it's also something, for our digital editions, this is real the nitty-gritty, but we'll look to do kind of special offers on it. So, the Kindle Daily Deal sort of thing, you'll put it forward for those sorts of things, so you're getting that different market, those different readers into the book, and hopefully then moving forward to kind of next books and a publishing career, really, for the authors.
I know we're tight on time, but just I think an interesting, a common misconception, I think, especially as a reader or a buyer, you're well, everyone that I know reads paperback, so you kind of think that that's the big edition. But then it's interesting because from a publishing perspective, all of our work goes in the hardback in terms of there are very limited review slots for paperback. So it's about getting those reviews on hardback, whacking them on the paperback and that sort of thing. But yeah, we normally like there are paperback review slots where people who've reviewed in hardback, you kind of reapproach them and say, like, can you put this in your paperback roundup where they exist? Trend roundups and thematic roundups, like places like Stylists do a lot of themed roundups, so it's like pitching for those sorts of things. And in terms of like involving Emma, it's about reapproaching great champions of the book in hardback or any kind of like themed events like the Waterstones Nottingham event. Obviously this was for hardback, but you know, it's like 9 months post pub that you just did that. But that was a Women in Horror weekend. We say after being like, the book's not horror, but you know, you just fit her in where they put her. But like, so like looking for bookshops that do well in that space and then having a few like key paperback events. But interestingly, like also for festivals, for instance, like hardback is the time to do festivals. So like Emma did Edinburgh in August. But I think sometimes people are like, it's like a common misconception of like paperbacks are everywhere. So that's when I'll be doing, like that's when the events will happen. But actually for the most part, because there's so much content and so many books out, festivals are like, we just want what's out now. So if this book came out last year in hardback, like we've kind of seen it already. So I think that's interesting. So there's opportunities there, but actually like the hardback is the main time. Yeah.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left because I've talked too much. Are there any questions for any of the panelists? And we have a roving mic. We're recording, so that's why we're using mics.
Okay.
We probably don't need them.
I wanted to ask Emma what the process was about finding out how your book was doing in terms of sales after publication, and yeah, how that works, whether you were kept up to date and whether you were stressed about how many it had sold.
My expectations had been managed beforehand, in that because my book is so kind of seated in like the literary arena, they were just like, we can hope, you know, for like fine sales. And from what I understand, it kind of did as expected. But basically, I was emailed the figures. I can't really remember. I think on the first week sales figures, and then possibly the second week. And then afterwards, it's kind of like on request, and some authors really like knowing, some authors don't want to know or don't really care. And I'm in the latter camp. I'm happy to leave it. I'm kind of like, my job was to write it, and that's all I can do. And then in America, it's kind of same sort of thing. They give you the figures initially after it just comes out for like the initial swell of interest, and then as and when you want a top-up of information, they'll give it to you if you ask. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, you can ask for sales in different formats, and that can be so interesting to see, like, oh, people absolutely love the audiobook of this, which is, you know, maybe not necessarily something that we expected it was going to be as popular, if not more popular, than the print edition. So I think, you know, I love the detail, so I always ask for it. And yeah, it can be very interesting to kind of build up that overall picture, because it can sometimes affect then what you are going to do for the paperback. And you sort of see how people are consuming the book.
Yeah, it's not something. So that's data that we as publishers send out, and it's. I have found over the years, that most of my authors are like, I like to know the initial spread, but then kind of I will never gatekeep that, but I'm not going to kind of put it to you unless you want it. Some of my authors, very few of my authors, want it like every week, and which I'm like perfectly happy to do. But I think most other authors are like, I just want to get on doing the other stuff of it, and then to see what happens. And sometimes I think I'll be, you know, with Women's Hour, we'll say, oh, this is the spike we saw, because you know you want to give that feedback as well. But yeah, it's kind of on request whenever you want it.
Any more questions? Question here at the front, Annabelle. Oh, and one at the back, and then we might have to say that is it.
Okay.
Hello, Alice.
Hi.
We'll come to you next.
Question for all of you apart from Emma. Did the Discovery's stamp of approval make any difference to your decisions along the way?
I can go first on that from a publicity perspective, because I just wanted to flag that like we worked really closely with the team at the Women's Prize, like with Annabelle and Claire, and they were amazing. So collaborated really closely with them in terms of cover reveal. Emma did a blog post. You did Women's Prize Live this past summer. So I think from my side, obviously, this is I should have probably gone last because I'm like, this is the last piece of the puzzle. But it was a huge plus for us to be like, we can collaborate with the Women's Prize and have this discoveries. And I think like, obviously, I mean, I think any kind of like Women's Prize discoveries angle is a really good angle when pitching for press. I think in the case of Emma, which unfortunately it's her label and no one else's, that she's the inaugural winner. But I think that is an extra help and was definitely like an asset to just have to be like, but I think anyone to be like, they have this amazing credit that's really useful when flagging to press, just like the quality of the writing. And also that, I mean, obviously we believe in the book and like love it so much, but it's nice to be like, these people also believe in the book. Do you know what I mean? So it was great for me, and yeah, amazing to work with the Women's Prize throughout.
Yeah, and the same from my perspective, you know, to say, here is a novel that's won a prize before it's even published. You know, it was something that like publishers love hearing about discoveries, and it was a, you know, really exciting thing to be able to say, I have the winner of the first winner of discoveries. So, you know, and you can
I
take
just say
the other
that,
side of the coin.
Yeah, I mean, it coming into my inbox, I get a lot of submissions into my inbox, as you imagine, and anything like that can kind of, it's just a flashpoint for me to be able to explain that to my team, to know that it can kind of flow into publication as well. Definitely.
And I think also like for like for every part of the process, like endorsements and things, and being able to have that extra like, whoa, this is the Women's Prize, like that all helps. So yeah.
We've got one final question here at the end. Have we got a mic? Have I lost Annabelle? Thanks, Lily. Second row.
This question is for Emma. And you said, I think, that you did 4 or 5 drafts. And I was wondering, how different was the first draft to the finished copy?
If we count the first draft as the 40,000 word manuscript that Lucy first read, I think the soul of it has been the same the whole way through, and the voice has been the same the whole way through. But essentially, there's an entire subplot that was essentially added. So in terms of kind of plot points, and this is hard to answer. So I think tonally and kind of the general arc have always been the same, but it's definitely become much. It became much richer and probably more like complex every time. So I think its heart was the same, but maybe its like shape changed slightly.
Okay.
Changed a lot, actually.
Right, ladies, we're going to have to call it there, I'm afraid. I do have lots more questions, but we'll have to hold them for later. Would like to say a big thank you, ladies, for all of your time. Emma, Lucy, Rhiannon and Katya, thank you very much.